Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of the Vampire Diaries, Grimm, Sleepy Hollow, as well as Emerald City. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you don't want to hear about, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time slots when I start talking about each of the respective shows I'm talking about. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I have to say about the Vampire Diaries, you can skip to Grimm, Sleepy Hollow, or Emerald City, whichever one that you care to listen to. But first off, we're going to talk about this week's episode of the Vampire Diaries. This episode picks up with, essentially with the time frame Stefan's given. It's been about a couple weeks since what went down last week's episode, not last week, the previous episode, which took place around Christmas. Damon and Stefan have been, doing their work for Cade, and essentially Stefan has been trying to keep his Ripper side at least controlled to a certain extent. He doesn't mind killing and stuff like that, obviously, but it's like he's trying not to lose complete control and become submerged in it. So it's like to the point, gaining his name for literally ripping people apart. It's like, so he's trying to keep people's heads on. It's just like, hey, I can do it. I can keep myself cool, calm, and collected. Damon doesn't believe so. Which, obviously turns out to be true later on when, Stefan literally massacres everyone in the hospital just because, and which is, I'm sure, exactly what Cade wanted. I'm guessing on some level, maybe Stefan, even with his humanity turned off, wanted to kind of hold on to that, not completely reverting into a Ripper, because it's always his greatest fear, because he doesn't, it's something that kind of gets brought up in episodes. Like, Stefan tends to fall off the bandwagon a lot. And it's just and he always feels bad about it, but it's always something later on down the road forces him, whether it's just something he does himself or just circumstances. One of the last times he was a Ripper was because Klaus forced him to turn off his humanity. So, because the interesting thing about Stefan without his humanity on, it's because normally, there's some level of hey, we're on the same side, but even then it's Stefan will use and manipulate anyone to do whatever he needs to, whatever goal he needs to accomplish, just because it's, for him, it's not even necessarily about a goal. It's not even hey, we're doing this for Cade, to keep ourselves from getting out of hell. It's no, it's mainly because it's he enjoys doing what he does. Because it was that point where Damon, they were at that meeting, and obviously Damon's talking about the fact that he has anger issues and stuff like that, ends up basically finding the person there that is the most evil and kills him. But the moment he turns around, Stefan's already killed everyone else in the room. He's oh, really? Should we have done that? I thought we were only going to kill this guy because he was the most evil. And it's oh yeah, that's fine. Good. Give him the cave. It's the rest of these, they're for me. And so, and that was kind of something that you see early on in the episode, oh, Damon is actually very sympathetic. He didn't want to go through all that. It's you would think he would, Mr. I have my humanity switched off, because he's been the first one to be in the past, the way he's been, because that's interesting, because it's the flip side of the way things have always been currently. For Damon, he's always just been hey, do whatever civil's okay, let's kill all these different people, whatever. It's no big deal, and it's always been Enzo who's kind of the voice of reason, but oh, do we really have to do this? Let's only kill the people we absolutely have to. But it's flipped, because you kind of found out, you kind of see why. Obviously, the big angle of that is because he has Elena's necklace, and it does something to him that, the best way is the way Stefan describes it. Basically, that humanity switch is just tilting back and forth. Because we saw it at the very end of the last episode, where it's the moment he saw the necklace and got memories of Elena, he knew he didn't kill Sybil, but it was just enough to kind of incapacitate her for a while. And it's he did that just because it was he just I don't know, I guess there was some part of him that was trying to punish her for the fact of what she did. So, but you just see that there is a little bit of Damon, that side of him that's oh, let's not do this, especially when it comes, because essentially, but it's still, like I said, it's tilting back and forth, because him and Stefan have that little bet, because they basically come across that, what is she? She was either a doctor or a nurse, and her name is Tara, and essentially, it was a bet to see oh, was she, it's because Damon's oh, really picking her? It's shouldn't we be picking someone that's really evil? And it's oh, he's but I'm looking at her, he's I'm sure she has a tragic past, and that tragic past, there's something bad in her past that she's done that she's trying to make up for by being really, really good. And Damon's nah, she's just good by nature or whatever. And it's oh, let's make a bet. And he knocks, Damon out with the, Vervain, and uses him like that. Once, kind of reiterating what I was saying earlier about willing to use people. It's I even love Damon's line of could you please stop cheating for 1 second? And love Stefan's reply, like, I work for the devil. I don't have to play fair. Essentially, compelling Tara to believe Damon is the one that was behind her, because her backstory being like, obviously her family, her parents died in a car accident. They were organ donors, and that's kind of why she kind of got into work that she got into. Very eerily, because you notice at the moment Damon first saw her, like, she kind of favors Elena a little bit, because the moment he met her, he grabbed onto the necklace in his pocket. But basically, Stefan just stacks the whole situation against him. I mean, that's kind of the main point. It isn't necessarily to find 100% evil people, the most evil people. What you're supposed to find is because of what he wants Stefan to do for him. I don't know, maybe Damon never really got the memo, but that's what Cade really wants Stefan to do, was to take people who are borderline, who are just like on the cusp of could be evil, and push them to be evil. Because it's like people who could have gone that other route, that other way, those are the souls that Cade finds the most delicious. So he's like, he wants Stefan to do that for him. So I'm guessing that's what it is. But it seems like maybe Damon doesn't know that's what's up, because it seemed like Tara was a decently good person, but it's like, you get far enough into someone's head, you can push them to do some stuff. Like, he kept pushing and pushing, but Tara kept backing out. She's like, no, I don't want. He's like, no, he's the one that did this to your parents. It's like, oh, you shouldn't trust Damon. Like, oh yeah, he's my brother and everything, but who's to say he won't? It's almost interesting, because the whole conversation of being like, oh, who's to say he won't do something bad again? He needs to just basically stop. It's almost like the real Stefan talking then too, because it's like kind of like you could argue that's also kind of talking about Damon in general, not just this fake persona of him being the one that killed that drunk driver that killed her parents in an accident. Because it was like, the same thing could be said for Damon. It's like he made mistakes after mistakes, and it just causes trouble for everyone around him. And Stefan, out of anyone, just kept giving him chances over and over again, which led to him making more problems, causing more problems over and over again. And it's just, I don't know, it sucks that things end in that way, because Damon didn't want them to end that way, especially with Tara. He didn't want to kill her, but it was the only way he was going to get Stefan off his back. And he even threw the necklace out the car, but granted, he ended up chasing it down later on. So with him even more, because he's already conflicted in his own emotions, plus looking at her, like, not only does she look like Elena a little bit, she also has a similar backstory to Elena, losing her parents and stuff like that. I totally forgot about the whole medical aspect of it too, of like, oh yeah, she wanted to be a doctor and everything. And then I was like, right, because there was a whole situation of her, was it interning or working with Joe 2 seasons ago or whatever. I was like, right, that was that. I forgot about that. I totally forgot that that's kind of what she wanted to do and stuff like that. So just seeing the similarities, and it's so seeing, it's almost like he killed Elena himself, which, I mean, he was kind of already in that mindset before. Was that last season? When he thought that he killed her in his delirium. What was it? The Phoenix Stone. That because he was suffering for that, he couldn't tell whether he was still in the stone or back in the real world. Like, he almost burned Elena's body, that type of situation. So it's, I guess, almost a reflection of that too. So, but it's so interesting that things would be taking that route, because it is like, normally it's Stefan trying to save Damon, but it seems like we might be in a situation where we might have Damon trying to save Stefan. It's like, I mean, because it's hard to say how that will all play out, because like there's no winning this, because like you're essentially in servitude to the devil. It's like you don't do what he wants you to. It's like going straight to hell. But it's like, it makes you wonder what's going to happen once because Damon hasn't had his flip switched back on since like working under Sybil, since last season, and being taken, him and Enzo being taken by her. He's always had his switch flipped. So it makes you wonder like how he's going to feel about like everything once his humanity does eventually turn back on it. And it is. It's just only a matter of time, and he also has to keep the necklace a secret from Stefan, because it's like, I mean, there's no telling what Stefan will actually do, being in Ripper mode now, finding out that, oh, you're not, you're just a buzzkill, brother. You're not even having fun anymore. He might do other drastic things to make Stefan, work with him. And at the same time, kind of coinciding, we learned so much more. Sybil has basically been pretending to be a high school teacher, history specifically. And basically, we end up learning a lot about Mystic Falls in general. Like, for instance, the 5 founding fathers aren't really the people who found, not the founding fathers, the founding families, like, the Forbes, the Lockwoods, the Gilberts, etc., were kind of like not really the real founders of Mystic Falls, apparently, because it's essentially Sybil wanted to track down a special bell that was made by Matt's dad, the Maxwells. Because apparently this bell is like a three-piece thing. There's that tuning fork, as well as the piece that Damon got from Peter's storehouse or whatever, plus this bell. Apparently, it's kind of like the whole bell, once you get everything together, is an amplifier. Like, the tuning fork already hurts a siren the way it is, but you combine that with the bell, which will make the resonation of the sound amplify by like 1,000-fold or whatever. So it's like, imagine what that would do. Like, I'm thinking mainly it's because we still don't know what in the long run of things, like what that means for what Sybil wants it for. Because at the end of the episode, we end up finding out that Celine's the one that actually took it. The bell. So she has at least 2 of the pieces. Because I think, if I remember correctly, the last person to have the tuning fork was her. So I think Sybil only has 1 of the pieces. I think Celine has 2 of them, I think. Well, more than 2, because apparently the bell is broken into pieces. Because essentially, I'm thinking, where my mindset is, I still think this is all about killing Cade. I think in the end of it all, because I think for Celine, she doesn't think, I'm sure there's a part of her that's like, she will never be able to get away from Cade's grasp. Even this whole deal with Damon and Stefan is probably like an only momentary thing that eventually Cade might change his mind and decide to take them back under his wing. So maybe, I don't know, maybe that's what Celine's got in mind. Maybe that's also what Sybil's got in mind. It's hard to say. Not unless this is something about themselves. I don't know. Like, what they plan to do. Like, do they plan on trying to get, like, could it be a situation of like trying to use the bells as a means of destroying their powers forever, making them normal? I mean, it makes you want, that seems like that might be something Celine might want. I don't know. Maybe it might not be something Sybil wants. I'm sure Sybil always wanted to be a normal girl, but at the same time, it's like, well, now that she's had these powers for so long, would she be willing to give them up? I mean, I don't know. She's able to get and do whatever she wants to, but at the same time, who's to say she wouldn't want to be a normal person? I don't know. Like, it's really hard to say. I still believe its main purpose is going to be a weapon. I still think the end goal is to kill Cade, but maybe it's not. But I would assume so, because just a tuning fork is enough to work on them, but Cade is as powerful as it is, so you'll need something a lot more powerful, so I'd assume the bell. But essentially, we end up learning out that basically the 5 founding families of Mystic Falls essentially kind of turned the Maxwells into the laughingstock. That's why Peter ended up back in what was like 92 or whatever. He ended up throwing the bell because it turned into like a parade type of thing, like on Founders Day or whatever. It was like a tradition, and it pissed Peter off because it's like, this is our family's legacy right here, and it's kind of treated like a trinket. And at the same time, the Maxwells are kind of like the laughingstock of the town because they're not really recognized as anyone special. Like, even though the Maxwell family is the ones that kind of created the first trade, they kind of created the first boom of Mystic Falls, that they really kind of should be credited as like the true founder of Mystic Falls and not the founding family. So it's like, to him, he harbors a lot of hate towards him. And on some level, it seems like not necessarily hate, but envy and jealousy is on Matt's part, because it's like, I grew up with all these other people around me whose families are so important, you know, like all his best friends essentially are part of the founding families and stuff like that. But he felt like such an outsider. But it's like, you weren't around to tell me that my family was something special, so I wouldn't have felt like such an outsider. So, because Matt was like super pissy the entire episode. He's like, oh, you're coming here telling all these different things about the family and stuff like that. It's like, all you've done is run away from everything. And it's like, you got to, you know, I don't know. It's really hard to say 100%. Like, it seems like in general, Matt's just mad about the whole family situation. It's not, I feel like it's not just one thing. It's just everything compiled on top of each other. Like, he had this legacy that he didn't even know about because his dad never stuck around long enough to actually tell him about it. His dad's like, dude, I've made mistakes, dude. I'm trying not to make mistakes. He's like, don't make the same mistake I did. Like, you know, be there for your family. So it's like, which I don't think he was referring to Matt's friends. I think he's talking about, you know, he's like, hey, we're here now. Let's be there for each other now because we're kind of all that we have left. Like I said, it's been a long time because, like I said, the last time I remember his mom popping up was like, hey, she was getting kicked out of town. But at the same time, it's like, this is about his dad's side of the family, not his mom's side of the family. But it's kind of like they're kind of the last ones in this whole situation. He has a son, too, doesn't he? I think that's kind of the whole situation because he has another family, doesn't? I don't remember. I thought he did when Damon first popped up, you know, going after him. But it was just kind of interesting because for the longest time they've made it seem like, oh, the founding fathers were just I keep saying the founding fathers. I keep turning this real life, but the founding families were just the pinnacle of everything. But it's like, it, you know, it makes you wonder what kind of shift would that mean for the future with their family. Will it mean something or will it mean nothing? You know, I mean, because most of the founding families are kind of just whittled down to nothing. Like when it comes to the Gilberts, I mean, no one really knows about Elena's situation, so she's technically around, and Jeremy's technically around, but they're kind of the last surviving. Jeremy's the last blood relative of the Gilberts, and then the Lockwoods died with Tyler. So it's like the founding families are kind of whittled down to nothing at this point. And even the Forbes is kind of the last surviving Forbes is Caroline, and she's a vampire, so no, because she has children too, so they can possibly carry on the torch. And speaking of her children, a perfect segue, is Sybil just being the way she is, trying to get on solid to Caroline's head. Is like, oh yeah, you think you're going to get your happy ever after. He's like, even if this all works out the way you think it, and Stefan comes back to you the way he was before, all the man you've loved and everything, right? Well, who's to say he won't fall off the bandwagon? Because I brought it up earlier, like he's always on and off the bandwagon. That's kind of what, you know, in my head, that's what brought that up earlier. But I'm bringing it back this time and explaining, you know, it's like, who's to say he won't turn on your children? So it's like, I hope for your sake it doesn't happen. So he's implanting little bits of doubt in her head because she does know, like, it's not even just like, she's seen it happen, even in the time that she's known Stefan. It's happened, him shifting into a ripper, and it's happened a lot of times over his life. Just things have pushed him, you know, not just things, people have pushed him to kind of turn back into his ripper self. Which isn't to say, like, hey, she didn't make mistakes when she had her humanity turned off, but Stefan is a whole breed of his own. Like, he's just a killing machine. You know, it being a ripper, he can even put someone like Damon to shame with what he does, so it's going to be interesting to see, like, how that affects things going forward, too. I mean, because Caroline's in, like, a very bad position. It's like she doesn't have her fiancé anymore. She doesn't have any of her best friends because Bonnie's obviously off, was it Paris or Italy with Enzo? Then there's the whole Elena situation, obviously. Then, obviously, she doesn't have her mom. She's just kind of all alone, you know? She has Matt, but even that's just not concrete enough. Like, the people, I'm sure that, you know, because Caroline always had a vision of like, yo, this is what her life would be. Like, Caroline was that type of person, always look to the future and be like, okay, this is what my life is going to be. I doubt she thought for once that she wouldn't have, obviously she probably thought, oh, I'd be married or something like that. Never once did she, never thought she'd be a vampire, having immortality, plus not being with the man that she loves, as well as not having her two best friends by her side, Elena and Bonnie. Like I said, obviously Bonnie's not going forever. She's a temporary thing, but still, it's just a moment of where it's like Caroline's just stuck in the middle of this situation alone. She doesn't even have her children anymore. Like, it just sucks. She's left all alone standing, you know? And it's like, Bonnie brought up that fact of how she felt when, like, Enzo was gone, you know? But it's like, look at Caroline's situation. It's like, man, she is legitimately alone. Everything kind of around her life is kind of falling apart. You know, she doesn't have anyone left currently. All she can do is wait and hope that this whole situation plays out the way she wants it to, with Stefan back to where he was before his humanity flipped coming back to her. And then once this whole Cade as well as the siren situation is done, get her children back too. But until then, she's all on her own. Something else that was kind of interesting, there's that I guess they're interns, rather they're college students. The college student that basically Rick informed, he's like, yeah, basically Rick told me everything about explaining the whole situation I know about Sirens too. He wants revenge. There was kind of that moment where him and Matt's dad were talking, and they're just like kind of nerding and geeking out about this whole situation. Like, oh man, this is the great thing about, oh man, dude, you're this whole Maxwell family thing. He's like, yeah. And you had Matt just standing in the background being super pissed about it. To me, I'm sure that was another thing that kind of pissed Matt off, because it's like, here he is talking about their family to someone else, kind of like kind of getting all gushed up about it over it with someone else besides him. So it was just kind of something interesting else that kind of came up in the episode. But overall, very good episode. I'm very interested to see how that will all play out. It makes you wonder, will Damon come back to Mystic Falls to try and get other people to help him? Which is also going to be a hard thing to sell too, because it's like, everyone's like, no, you had the chance. This is all your fault, especially Caroline, because she's like, this whole thing happened because you put Stefan in this position in the first place. It's going to be one of those situations again where it's like, oh, it's Damon's fault, and now Damon's got to try and fix it. Which is the thing though, like, it breaks your heart. It's like, so much stuff happens. Like, you don't want to label it, but Damon's kind of the screw up in the family. You know, he's the big brother, like, you know, and there's just so much that just happened throughout his life, and he had his reasons for doing everything, and it's like, you can't agree with his methods, but, you know, deep down the fact is, you know, because the thing is, you also have to think about who Damon was before he became a vampire, like, because that's something we don't 100% know. We know little bits here and there about him before he became a vampire, but it's like, obviously becoming a vampire just amplifies what was already there for someone, possibly, you know, and it's kind of sad that things have just kind of gotten to this point, and to be who he is, you know, it's just like, oh man, Damon Salvatore, because when people talk about the Salvatores, the only person they really care about is like, it's always been Stefan's amazing, Damon, the bad guy that goes around killing people, but Damon has a good side to him. We've kind of seen that in the past couple of seasons, and it's like, he makes mistakes, but he tries his best to make up for it, but it's just not good enough, because he still has that stigma of just being a bad guy, because he's played that role for so long. And I think because he's played that role for so long, he doesn't know how to play any other role. He's like, that's the role that's designed for me, and it's just, I have to play the part that's been given to me. And it's like, I guess, because I think on some level, Damon doesn't think he deserves to be happy, you know, and I think that's what drives him to be the way he is. I mean, I truly believe that's a big motivator for him, so I just hope, I don't know, I don't know what episode this is. I think that break ended up reaching, like, legitimately the halfway point, because this season is only 16 episodes, so we're really trudging along, so this means, like 7 more episodes after this. So, I mean, I'm really curious to see how this ends. Will it be a good ending? Will it be a happy ending? Will it be a sad ending? No telling where things are going. There's no clear picture of, this is exactly how it ends at. So, we just have to, wait and see what transpires next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Grimm. A lot of stuff went down. As expected, Wu and Hank arrested Renard, and it's not like they came at him with some soft evidence. It's like, no, it was all valid evidence of like, your fingerprints are all over the place. You're having an intimate relationship. It's like, well, what would be the motive for killing her? And they came up with one that's like, well, for your campaign, you're trying to create the image of the perfect family. And it's like Rachel being around would be kind of putting a nail in it. I was like, dude, that's some good reasoning. Yes, even they know that's kind of BS, because even they're not 100% sure if Renard killed her or not. It doesn't matter. The evidence supports the theory that he could possibly have done it. So it's like, that's all they need, because they need to get him out of the way so that Nick has a little more room to breathe. Then there's the whole situation where, like, because I was wondering about that, because Nick is like he's like, no, I gotta surrender. But what I really like is the fact this Trouble's like, no, and then beside him is Eve being like, no. And it's like every episode is going by, ever since that stick thing, she's becoming more and more like Juliet, because she even comments on it later in the episode, being like, she feels like there's two different people inside of her, like, and she's struggling with it, like. Like I said, it's going to be really interesting to see what that means later on. Like I said, the whole love triangle situation, like, I don't know if her turning back into Juliet will change anything, because obviously it seems like, his heart's set on Adeline, but who's to say, I mean, because him and Juliet have so much history, so who's to say that won't spark some old feelings? Because, I mean, you even see the way Nick is looking at her, because it's almost like, I think he can almost see Juliet coming back, but he still sees a little bit of Eve, but I think but the thing is, it's hard to say if he'd ever be able to look past it, because Juliet played a part in getting his mom killed. So it's thanks to her that his mom is dead, like the last family he had left. So it's kind of like, I don't know, but it's one of those situations, like, he managed to look past it and work with Eve, because I guess in some way, shape, or form, it's like, she looks like Juliet, but she's not really Juliet. She has all of Juliet's memories, but she's Eve, she's not Juliet, so I think there's that little compartmentalizing. So, but I love the fact that what also pushed him to do it. It's like, remember I was like, everything's going crazy. Rosalie's pregnant. It's like, wait, really? Wow, you're pregnant? And she's like, Monroe. He's like, I'm sorry. I panicked and everything. And Nick, now, because he doesn't want to get his friends dragged into this, like, and so he wanted to surrender. And when he was about to surrender, I was like, oh man, hey, that's a noble thing to do. It seems like everything's going to be okay. Like, I was actually scared for a second. I was like, oh, don't tell me they're going to turn out to be vested and they're with Black Claw and they're about to try and wipe it. It's like, oh, no, they're just regular cops. Then they pull out the stick and they're like, what the hell is this? I was like, just a regular stick. And then boom, it sends out a shockwave and knocks him all unconscious. And it's like, wait, whoa, what? This is the first time the stick has ever been used in an offensive manner. And it's not like they did anything. It just kind of did it on its own. Because something we learned in this episode, whatever the case may be, that stick has some kind of connection to Nick. And it's like, he actually struggles with it because it's like, he's super against like letting it go later on in the episode. They're like, hey, let's let it go. It's like, you can put it up. And he's like, no, I think it's better if I just hold on to it. This saved my life. And Eva's kind of like, well, yeah, it saved all of our lives. But then we saw what that thing did back there. And it's like, we never better figure out what the hell it is before it ends up killing one of us. And so Nick puts it back. He's like, okay, I'm gonna walk away. And then when he's walking away with Bud, he kind of gets the itch. And Bud is like, oh, you okay, Nick? You're looking a little angsty. And he goes back for the stick. He's like, I gotta get it. And he's holding it. And he's just like, and it's calling to him, speaking out to him. And he just throws it back because he kind of fights it a little bit. So it has some kind of connection to it. It makes you, because it was hidden by Grimm's back during the First Crusade, so maybe it has a special connection to Grimm's. The only one, Nick is the only Grimm that's actually touched it. I don't know, maybe the longer, like, Nick has it in his possession, the more in tune with him it becomes. Like, maybe it's something that, it's a weapon in the hands of a Grimm. Like, because Trouble hasn't touched it yet, so maybe that will influences that, but it's like, I don't know. That's what I'm seeing so far. It is a weapon specifically tied to Grimm's. And it's like, we don't know where that power comes from. Maybe in some shape or form, it drains away the Grimm's life force the more they use it. I don't know. It saved his life. I don't know. Maybe this also has to deal with the fact is that he died and then came back. Maybe that has something to do with it. Like, it's hard to say, like, whether Nick was full on dead when it brought him back, or was he just on the precipice of death and then it just yanked him back, towards life. So then I really love, like, Renard trying to do everything he can to get himself out of lockup. He's asking the judge for help. He ends up asking Adeline to come, be his alibi. And she's like, wait, what? She's like, okay, so you want me to be your alibi for the murder you didn't commit, because your real alibi for it is you killing the guy that would be your alibi. He's like, yeah, isn't this simple enough? This should be simple enough for you to do. She's like, I'm not going to. She's like, because what if we find out I'm perjuring myself and so I could go to jail? I need to be there for my 2 kids. I'd rather you go to jail than me go to jail. And also, I'm sure she's silently thinking of her back of her mind, yes, you also tried to kill the man I love too, so go F yourself, type of situation. So, but then Nick comes to a decision. He's like, all right, I got to find a way around this. The only way I'm going to do this is by making sure Renard clears my name. By doing that, how I do that is by helping him get out of prison. So basically, Adeline uses something known as a trust me not. That's it. K knot. And it's literally a knot that binds 2 people, and they make like, if one of them breaks the promise, that the first person to break the promise ends up, literally choking to death. So, but Renard, with his connections, ends up finding a loophole around it, and he's just like, oh man, you suck. So there's no repercussions for what he did. What it makes matters worse is he's literally, because even Hank himself said it, what makes it worse, Renard has everything. He's free, got the charges dropped against him. He didn't have to drop the charges against Nick, so Nick's still a wanted man. Plus, he's in a position where he still has all the power to play. And even Nick is like, oh, Adeline, you're gonna have to go back. She's like, wait, what? No, I hate him. I can't. He's like, no, you have to go back. It's bad enough he's coming after me. If you stay here, he's going to come after you too, especially, if you got Diane with you. So, because there's that constant moment where you see, like, Sean, like I think I brought it up last week's episode, but it's also in this episode, like you see him kind of like he was in a cell, he ended up seeing like a bullet casing and a gun behind him, and he picks it up and it's thinking back to when he killed Meister. Obviously it was kind of a mercy killing to keep home dude from like, you know, making him suffer. But it's a situation where it's like I think on some level Renard is doubting this, feeling bad about the decisions he made, because it's like, I mean, literally, you were a good guy. You weren't always the clear cut good guy from the beginning, but you know, eventually him and Nick joined forces, and ever since then, it's been good. But now he turned his back on everyone. It's like, why would you do that, dude? You were a good guy. You were someone they trusted and had by their side, but then he got tempted by power, and it makes you wonder, will he have a 180? Like, will he go back to being the good guy that he was before, or is it just completely downhill that the only way this is going to end with Renard being dead? I don't know. I mean, especially because he's got Black Claw all over Nick. I mean, granted, trust me, Black Claw would want Nick out of the way anyway because he's a Grimm and he's a hindrance to their plan. I mean, I think if they wanted to, they really would prefer him to be on their side because, like, hey, they could use a Grimm under these circumstances, like, because he could be an asset, but he's become more trouble than he'd be worth, so they'd want him dead anyway. But plus they think he killed the guy that Sean actually killed, so it just really sucks that everything's kind of stacked against him like that. I really love Monroe in this episode being just like, yeah, let's look after Diana, and then he looks and sees all the stuff that she's doing, and it's just like freaking him out and everything. And when everyone's like, okay, let's go do this, he's like, you're gonna leave me here alone? That's fine. And Diana's like, no, you're not alone. I'm here with you. He's just kind of like, because this is like actually their first time seeing what Diana can really do, him and Rosalie. Because the fact is, prior to this, they had only, like, they saw the, you know, her popping up in Nick's apartment like that, and it's just like, oh, hey, yeah, that's cool what she can do. But it's like, because even he's like, oh yeah, that was pretty impressive what you can do, and Diana's like, why? He's like, you know, because people can't normally do that. But also there was a point where she was like floating one of the jars, and she ended up touching it, and it just poofed from existence. And it's like, it just shows you just how powerful she is. And to her, it's nothing, because she's like, oh, why am I so different? Like, I don't see anything different. It's like, yeah, no one else can do what you do. Like, I doubt her mom could do what she's doing, and her mom's a full-blown hexen beast. Even as powerful as Eve was, I doubt she could do what Diana's doing. And it's like, she's at such a young age and able to do what she does, but it's like, if she was older and more well-trained, it's no telling what she'd be capable of. And it just, like I said, you don't want her on your bad side. I mean, we saw what she did to the woman, what she did to Rachel, because, like, she got in between mommy and daddy. And that's why I'm also worried for Nick, because it's like, I think they're kind of keeping that hush-hush, but it's like, what if she finds out that Nick is, I mean, she has some understanding because she knows that Kelly is her brother, because she's like, oh yeah, she sees Nick and she's like, oh yeah, you're Kelly's dad. It's like, I like Kelly. He doesn't talk much though. It's like I said, what I love about Diana too is because she's so powerful, yet she's so cute and adorable about it, because she's having so much fun. It's like, what are we going to do next? And just Monroe just be like, why am I the one left alone in this situation? But it also turns out that Diana can see the markings on the claw, and it's like, but the fact is, she can see even more than Eve could. Eve could see like 3, and even then, like, is it because Eve went to the other side and saw that? I mean, because she went to the other side thanks to that death grip that she's able to see it, or is it something else entirely? And why is it that not only can Diana see it, she can actually see more of it? She can see all the symbols across, and she ends up drawing it. They have no freaking idea what any of it means, like where these symbols come from, and it's just, ugh. And the stat on top of that is the fact is that, you know, you have trouble leaving because HW, not the ones in Portland, someone outside of Portland is like, hey, you gotta come, and they're like, Eve's like, oh, what about me? And they're like, they didn't say anything about you, but it's like, hey, they want the Grimm, so it's like, Nick, you gotta come, I want you to come too. And Nick's like, I can't, with everything the way it is. But she's like, soon Renard's going to be back in control, and it's like, you can't, you know, stay here. And he's like, I have to, like, you know, everyone he cares about is here too, so he has to stay and fight. And it's just, oh my God, just everything is just so wrong. It's like an upheaval battle for Nick. I mean, we haven't even gotten to the worst part of it. He's literally just dealing with Renard right now. There's still the grand organization of Black Claw that has to be dealt with. Finding out what is up with this Styx situation, because I'm sure everyone's going, like, because that's still the question of, like, how is Nick still alive after everything? But now Renard's going to come out. I mean, Wu and Hank got kind of, he basically made them get fired. He was basically like, okay, when they had arrested him earlier, it's like, oh yeah, turn back around, take me back to Nick. It's like, why would they do that? Why would they help you try and kill their friend? It's like, why are you doing this, Sean? It's like, dude, you have the potential to be a good guy, but you're being a bad guy. It's just like, oh, like, you're so enticed by power. Don't do this. Like, it's currently going down the slip. Like I said, it might be a situation where it might be too late for him, because, like, killing Meisner was probably like, because Meisner back in the day was his trusted ally in this whole situation. And it's like, you killed him. Yeah, yes, in the grand scheme of things, you just betrayed him, but you killed him out of mercy, sure. But it's like, I feel like that's going to be a repeating thing, like him reliving everything he's done, because now he's going to be conflicted, because it's like all the things he's done to get here. And it seems like he's happy about it, especially when he got freed at it, and he's just like, yeah. It's just like, Bastard got everything he wants. And it's like, I was hoping it's like, something small is going to happen to you at the end. Nope, he's winning. And it's like, I'm curious to see how that will all play out. Because it's kind of interesting, because Diana was always something like, she was there in the storyline, but then obviously she disappeared when Nick's mom took her away, but now she's back in the storyline and everything, and she's a pivotal part, and it's like, makes you wonder what she's going to play in all of this. Maybe she kind of has some kind of connection to the stick too, because the fact is that she can see everything on that cloth, or maybe that's just a representation of just how powerful she is. It's just like, I don't know. I hope I wonder, is there going to be a situation where she turns against her dad or not? I don't know. Because like I said, if she finds out about Nick and Adeline, it's like Nick and Adeline being together was okay because it gave her Kelly, she has a brother. But now it's kind of like, I don't think she thinks too much about it. But if it comes between her and her mom and her dad, I'm sure Nick will be a threat too that she wants to take care of. So, and what's up with this new, what is HW going to do? Are they going to send people there to help Nick or not? Also Bud. I love Bud so much. He's just like, oh man, what if, my wife's going to think I'm dead? It's like, why would your wife think you're dead? I was like, I don't know. I haven't come home. And then later on when Nick is like, yeah, he's like, don't, what do you need me to do, Nick? He's like, just go home. He's like, okay, but I'll be here if you need me to. If you need me to live down here, I'll do it. I'll live here for the rest of my life down in the tunnels. And Wu's like, well, what about your wife? Oh, right. She wouldn't like living down here. And it's just like, I love you, Bud. You're so good. It does make you wonder, like, in the grand scheme of things, like, across all the Vestin Nick has ever come across, because Nick is not your typical Grimm. That's always been something that's been a part of the show. It's like, Nick is not a regular Grimm. Like, most Grimms, if they come across a Vestin, it's like, oh, you're a Vestin? Fink. Schwink. I don't know what Fwink is. Schwink, the sound of a sword or something, or some kind of blade slicing through somebody's neck and lopping off their head. That's typically how most Grimms do in it. But Nick was a kind of exception. That's why he has friends like Bud, Rosalie, as well as Monroe, is because it's like, hey, he's a Grimm that's not a bad guy. He's actually a nice guy. So it's kind of like, he's gained a lot of people's like support and stuff like that. So it makes you wonder how many of the people Nick has positively had experiences with in the past, how many of them are joined with Black Claw? Like I said, because it's a storyline that's kind of taken a step back a little bit. It's still there in the forefront, but the main issue right now is like Nick's whole circumstances, as well as, dealing with this whole Renard situation. But obviously, like, even that's connected to Black Claw, but we haven't seen, because the last time we saw Black Claws like making big moves was last season. They haven't made any big moves yet, at least that we know of. Like, so obviously Portland has always been the main focus. So, I mean, because the royal family is no longer a thing. I mean, if it is, I mean, the thing is, we still never know whatever happened to Nick's cousin. I mean, it's always, I mean, Diana keeps saying that, Renard is her dad, but it was always the thing between him and, I can't, I forgot his name, but, it's what's the actor's name? Alexei, Disneyoff is how I'm probably like messing up his name big time, but like Adeline hasn't seen him in a long time, so he was like kind of pulled off some way, but it was like that was kind of the thing. It was like, oh, we don't know who's her dad and who's not. But granted, I guess it's a situation where it's like, well, never mind. Like, the fact is that she latches on to Renard like she does means he must be her dad, or is it a situation of he just grows up like her dad? But the fact of the matter is, the king is dead. Diana basically pushed him out, got him to either pushed him out or made him jump out a helicopter. So he's dead. So it's, royal family is no longer an issue anymore. So now it's just Black Claw as because we still don't have a clear picture of who's at the top of this organization. And they haven't even presented themselves. It's like, I'm sure this, I mean, I don't know. It could be wrong. This season could be shorter, but most seasons end up being like in the 20 of episodes. So I'm gonna assume this one is too. So we've got like a long way to go. There's still a lot of story to tell. And I prefer a final season to be long. I know I'm talking about because the fact is a lot of times like final seasons are shorter, so it's just like I feel like it gives the story some time. It's like okay, they're going into this knowing it's the final season, so hey, we can write this like give it like a proper ending, so we don't have to worry about finding out at last minute we're getting canceled. It's like nope. We know this is the final season. We're letting story breathe. We're taking the paces to kind of let everything kind of breathe out, figure out all these different things. So very interested to see how things play out going forward. And now moving on to this week's episode of Sleepy Hollow, where the main problem in this episode was a coven of witches, well, a trio of sisters named the Dyer sisters, who basically have a special power of being able to tell people are lying to them. Essentially, there was a deal going on between Dreyfus. Dreyfus wanted to hand them this powerful blade that basically, hey, one cut from it, you're dead. And essentially, it's like, oh, let's exchange that for what they call the Witch Stone, which is kind of one of the artifacts he's after and stuff like that. And basically, they end up finding out that their sister lied to them. That basically they've been protecting this thing for like 300 years under false pretenses. They were kind of, I think, were under the impression that it was something that was going to help them in the long run. Like, oh, it was connected to witch. It's like, oh, it's their sacred right as witches to protect this. But it was like, no, it was something that Washington had commissioned them to protect. And their sister lied to him about it. And for retribution, they basically made a snake come out of her mouth. It's just kind of like, and essentially, I think what it is, the snake kind of represents your tongue. It's supposed to be your tongue, and when it comes out, that's you losing your tongue. And then they repeatedly stabbed her, obviously. I mean, it ended up leading to an interesting conversation between Diana and Ichabod. And I think last time I was confused because I was like, oh, Diana. I was like, no, her name's Diane. Like, I think that was kind of a worry in my mind because it messes with me a little bit because it's like, oh, this and Grimm at the same time. And it's like both having Diana. It's like, it does kind of mess me up with TV shows when like certain characters in one show have the same name as it. I mean, it's a pretty common name. It's not like, you get my point. It just kind of messes me up. So Diana brought up the conversation like, oh, why do you know so much about witches? Oh, my wife was a witch. Which is like, he doesn't bring Katrina up a lot in conversation. So this is kind of the first time he's really brought her up in a very long time. And it's just kind of like a subject he didn't really dive too much into. She's like, oh, it just kind of didn't work out, did it? It's like, oh, yeah. It's like, what about you and Molly's dad? And it's like, oh, yep, that didn't work out. And then, because earlier in the episode, Ichabod had a vision, kind of like using this special like Tibetan thing. Him and Jenny were working on, and it ended up revealing in his vision, it's like, oh, he saw Molly. He was thinking Molly was supposed to be kind of an answer to finding out who the new witness is, but it was like, when he looked at her picture, it's like, no, and Jenny found out, it's like, it's not a means of trying to find a means of locating the next witness. It locates the next witness. It's like, yep, Molly is the next witness, which Jenny kept an eye on her the moment she figured it out because she had to meet with her. And then, Ichabod would be like, she's not Abby. She's like, I know, but I think there was a part of her that was kind of hoping that in some shape or form. And I think I was kind of thinking that too. And I'm sure on some level, Ichabod was hoping the same thing. It's like, there would be a little bit of Abby there. Just in some shape or form, like her essence exists there within Molly or whatever. Very interesting though, is like the moment her and Ichabod met the first time and she's like, hello, and actually says something. Diana's like, wait, what? You're talking like, because like she even reiterated in this episode that like it happened, like Molly stopped talking like 2 weeks ago, which I mean, like I think I drew the comparison last episode. I'm not sure like how long it's been a little while between season 3 and season 4, so I mean that might fit. I brought it up then, but I don't know how correct I am. But obviously that does fit the timeline of when Abby died, so. Because even Molly herself is like, she doesn't know why she wasn't talking. She felt like there was someone else's shadow there. It's almost like she felt like she lost a friend or something, someone dear to her or something. Like, so I guess like in some shape or form, I think there is a little bit of Abby's essence that passed on to her. Like, I think it's kind of a situation when the witness passes on to the next person that, is supposed to be the witness. What I'm thinking it's like, all the previous witnesses go with them. So I'm thinking Abby is somewhere in Molly. The question is like, oh, do we tell Diana? Which Ichabod is hesitant to do it because even Jenny brings it up. It's like, seeing what being a witness did to her family, it's like it cost her sister her life. It threw their life into turmoil. The things it led to their life being hectic and crazy and like being caught up in this. As worse, what makes it worse of all is Molly's a kid. She's a child being chosen for a war between good and evil. Like she's meant to fight it. And it's like, how is that fair? Like I brought it up before. I was like, oh, Molly could be the witness, but maybe like, Diana's supposed to be there to kind of be her buffer. That she's there to kind of do the heavy lifting for her. But at the same time, I also threw out a possibility of like maybe Molly's just a buffer until Diana's willing to accept everything and become the witness that she's supposed to be. It's like nope. I guess it's more so it's like it's a timing thing. I guess it's a situation where it's like they chose her because it's like the battle's heating up and they need the two witnesses have to be here. So it's like they chose the next person. That was her. What's not like legitimately I'm glad to find out like they're not holding it over your head like, ooh, could Molly be the next witness? Because it's like, nope, Molly is the next witness. And it's like, because I brought it up before, like who I'd like the next witness to be and stuff like that. I will say they got a twist on me. Like was not expecting the witness to be a kid. That is a really big twist. But they haven't told Diana yet, but because Ichabod wanted to give them one more night. It's just like, hey, she has her daughter back to a certain extent, being able to talk to her daughter, hear her voice again after such a little while of being so scared and concerned. It's like, so the very least I can do, is give them at least today. Also, the fact is that nanny situation. I don't know why. Essentially, in the back of my brain, I'm like, okay, that's going to turn into something. I don't know. It could be just like a one-off thing. Like, oh, she has a nanny. Obviously, it's not a one-off thing. It's like anytime her mom's working, she's got the nanny. But it's like, that's going to turn into something. I don't know whether it's going to be a situation where it's like, oh, yeah, her nanny just got brutally murdered because someone figured out that she's actually the witness or something like that. That's going to be crazy, like, going forward. Because something else interesting that came up in this episode is like we have Jake. Jake is super accepting of everything. It's just like, oh man, Ichabod, you're the greatest. I'm gonna help you out. Do this, and this. Oh, this is amazing. The supernatural. It's like, oh, I'm helping out and everything. And then you have Alex being very suspicious of Ichabod because she's like, you see that? You know what I do? I break stuff apart, right? Well, I do that with people too. And it's like something about Ichabod just doesn't add up. It's like he's hiding something. He's not telling us everything, which is the truth. Because even when explaining the whole situation with the dire witches, he's still coming at it at a point of view of like, oh yeah, I'm a historian, so I know all this stuff. It's like you were legitimately there. That's why even one of the dire sisters recognized. I'm like, hey, you were one of Washington's soldiers. So that's because, like I said, it's so interesting because it's like Abby and Ichabod had that like right from the start being like, hey, I'm not actually from this time period. I'm actually from like 300 years ago. But obviously with this circumstances, he can't jump right into like, hey, I'm 300 years old. That was something he even had to kind of ease Abby into accepting with all the stuff that was going on around them. It's just going to be interesting to see him kind of ease her into it. But like, like I said, I like that about them because everyone's got their own personalities. And also there's a little thing too. Once again, something I didn't bring up during this episode, last week's episode, but it kind of came up again this episode. It's just the fact is calling her Agent Thomas. And anytime it came to referring to Abby, obviously, him at the beginning saying Lieutenant, and it's like, oh, Abby, and calling for her and everything. It's just like, but it's almost interesting because it's like he doesn't call like Diana by her first name. He's like, oh, Agent Thomas, like Agent. It's not quite there, but it's supposed to be kind of the equivalent because even when Abby was with the FBI, he still called her Lieutenant because it's just like, hey, that's the way that's who she is, who Abby was to him, and it's just, I don't know. It's just like interesting that everyone's kind of got their own personalities. Like I said, like we get a little like obviously Diana's the most like reluctant when it comes to this whole supernatural thing. She's trying to ease her way into it. It's just like, oh my god, there's witches and they're using glamour, and I'm with a girl who is very good at B&E, and then I'm inside of a glamored witch's house with a guy who has a crossbow to fight them, and it's just like, what has my life become? Like I said, you have Jake being super accepting. It's just like, oh man, this world is exciting. And you also have Alex, which at the beginning I was like, okay, obviously Alex is very skeptical when it comes to Crane, but I was not expecting the angle of her being like, he's just something's not right about him. Jake's thrown out the possibility, like, oh man, he's totally a time traveler. Because Alex did her due diligence, because she looked it up. It's like, yo, there's been like one Ichabod Crane in history from like back in the 1700s. Literally no other records of him. Try to look through family trees and stuff like that. Nothing until he popped up in Sleepy Hollow like 3 years ago. It's like, other than that, it's like, it's like, who is this guy? You know, the way he talks, like the certain, like, it's not even just the British accent. It's the fact is that the way he talks, the words he uses, the way he phrases things, plus the way he dresses, you know. For Jake, he's kind of like, yo, man, it's just trying to, you know, play the part, you know. So I wasn't expecting that angle. So I'm very curious to see what's going to happen first. Will they tell her? Will they tell everyone the truth first? Or will Alex kind of figure it out? Will they accept it is the question. Will Diane be like, okay, wait, what? It's like, yeah, your daughter inherited the position of my previous partner, witness, you know, she was a witness and I am a witness in this great battle of good versus evil. You know, so it's kind of a hard pill to swallow. And we're still not 100% know exactly what it is that Dreyfus is trying to do. The team has figured out, like, hey, he is collecting pieces. Like, whatever it is, he got, obviously what he got from the Dyer sisters, as well as Abraham's head from the monument. It's like, you know, they figured out, it's like, oh, there's actual pieces hidden in there. And it's like, what are these artifacts and what they meant for? I don't know. Like I said, I'm still curious to find out what is up with his partner. I forgot his name because it's been such a long time. The main antagonist from season 1 and season 2, he was the dude that Henry served. Obviously, he was the bigger part in season 1. Like, he obviously got killed by Henry, like, during the first half of season 2. But that dude, thought like going to be like the series antagonist. Nope, that was dealt with. And then last season we had Pandora. So it's kind of interesting how, like, a part of me was wondering, is like, what if that's actually that dude just from, like, now he's in a new body? What was that other world? Was it Purgatory? There was that kind of in-between world, like, Abby kind of ended up, like, there was a situation where Abby got trapped there. I think it was, like, during the first half of season 2, she ended up getting trapped there. It was just that other world, and it's just, I don't know. I'm wondering, will that be something that kind of pops up again? Because, as I was right, the Headless Horseman is making his way to DC, because of course he's going to be there, because he's around again. He got freed from Pandora and everything last season, so it's like, obviously he's going to be here, and now he's free, and, you know, obviously he still wants revenge against Ichabod. Because you know what makes it, what's even more interesting, because the fact is, one of the things he wanted more than anything was because he was originally in love with Katrina. That was his betrothed, but then it was like, you know, things between her and Ichabod happened, but it was like nothing actually happened. Like, Ichabod didn't let anything happen, but, you know, well, I think his original name was Abraham, you know, the Headless Horseman's original name, and it was like he got jealous and started, you know, turned against him for that reason, and it became the Hessian. But it was just kind of like, that's something that hasn't been brought up yet, is the fact is Katrina's dead, so I'm sure that's even more reason for him to hate Ichabod. It's like, oh, not only the woman I love is dead because of you too, so it's just, I'm just curious to see how this whole season will play out. Like, what Dreyfus is up to, what his ultimate goal is, what are all these artifacts connected to. Because the thing is, they do have to hide Molly's identity, because it's like, you know, because they could, if they find out Molly is next witness, it's like they could easily just target her and kill her. But it's like, so much is landing on their plate, and they have to decide what they are going to do. You know, something that has constantly crossed my mind is like, how do you deal with situations like that? Like, and that's something that's never really brought up, is like, once there's the supernatural thing is taken care of, because the witches in this case both disintegrated. You know, so it's kind of like, how do you really deal with that? Like, oh yeah, because there's 2 other bodies that you have to deal with. Plus, I'm sure the sister's, what was her name, Maul, I'm sure her body's at the morgue if it didn't disintegrate too when the rest of the sisters died, you know, once the glamour was removed. I mean, that's another thing too, because like, once the glamour was removed, like, because apparently the glamour only can't, like, technology can see through them, so cameras and stuff can show you what they really look like, and that's how they were able to find the house and everything too. So I'm wondering, like, when her sisters died, did she revert, because when everything happened, did she revert back to her old age? But it's like, what about these unexplained murders? It's like something that never really was like, yeah, we never really 100% dealt with that in Sleepy Hollow. It's just kind of like, yeah, that was solved, stop the monster, how do we explain it? Over here, look at this, haha, yeah. It's like, it's something that's never explained, and I guess that's the point of just like, hey, they find some workaround for it. I think some occasions they found explanations for it, but it's like, I don't know. Just like, I'm curious to see what they decide to do with Jenny's character this season, because it's just like, I don't know, like I said, like, her and Ichabod, it's just like, they've lost so much. She lost the man that she was in love with. He lost his wife. He lost his son. He lost his partner. She lost her sister. And like I said, also, like, where's Papa Mills? I want to know if he's going to play a part in this season or not. Just like, and I brought it up last episode too. It was like, I'm still trying to figure out this organization standpoint, because the organization that's that's connected to Dreyfus, apparently, aren't they the same group that Ichabod was supposed to lead? But then like that never happened. I do wonder, will there be any Bessie? Like, I think I brought that up last episode too. I'm sorry, I'm rehashing old stuff, but that was kind of, I'm still thinking about it. I was like, that kind of got me thinking. It's like, will there be any Bessie Ross? Like, even if it's just like one off episode or something, it's like, oh, it'd be kind of nice, because it was, the whole thing between him and Betsy. But I mean, he kind of cut off that bridge when him and Abby sent her back to her original timeline back in last season. So overall, very good episode. I'm just so interested to see how this plays out. Just like these new characters, I'm so interested to just see who get to have more fun with them, see how they work together and stuff like that. Because at this point, like I said, you got people like Alex not really 100% entrusting Crane, which, to be fair, he is hiding stuff. And it's like, how do you reveal the stuff that you know? I mean, granted, it's not like they're going to be like, oh, you're crazy. It's like, I mean, it's crazy any different than what we've dealt with already. Like a monster John Wilkes Booth, well, demon John Wilkes Booth, now witches. It's like, is it really that crazy to really think, I am from like 300 years ago, and that your daughter is, in fact, a protector in a very important key figure in the fight of good versus evil. So we'll just have to wait and see. And now moving on to this week's episode, Emerald City. We had a lot of interesting developments. One big one is that we kind of learned more about the Witch of the East, that she was the witch. Her magic was about controlling the elements. I'm still kind of confused on certain things. Like, the fact is, like, essentially, the person that was on a caravan that was with Dorothy and Lucas was basically like, hey, essentially she was, now that the Witch of the East is dead, essentially that this, nature is kind of mourning her because there's like a gigantic tornado like above her castle. But what I'm trying to understand is like what I wasn't really sure with the episode, because there's certain things that kind of made me think it's a lasting, like, because I was wondering, like, is there an everlasting effect when it comes to the weather? Meaning now that the Witch of the East is gone, like the balance of nature is kind of out of place, and it's like weather is going to go crazy all over the place. There's certain things that kind of make me think like that, but at the same time, it's also like maybe that's not the case. Maybe it's just like for now, because like the tornado was above her castle, so maybe it's like, okay, it destroys the castle as a means of being like, okay, this was kind of the centerfold of everything that was the Witch of the East, because that's kind of her home and just her base of operations, where she kind of, I guess, where she mainly kept the weather in check. So it's kind of, that was kind of the centerfold of it. So with it destroyed, everything kind of goes back to normal, like nature has full control again. Or is nature, like I said, the balance is kind of tilted because she's gone? I don't know. No one else really seemed that worried about it. So it seems like it's just kind of an isolated thing of just like, and just weather goes a little crazy for a little while, but then it eventually kind of snapped back into place. That mainly it is nature mourning her in some shape or form because she could control and manipulate it. A big part is like Lucas and Dorothy are still obviously have their problems too. That's something else that's continuing in this episode, which makes sense. It's like after seeing what Lucas did, it scares her to the point like when it was like the opportunity presented itself. It's like, oh, I guess we have to go different ways. She's like, okay, I guess we have to say goodbye here. It's like she was willing to go that route because like anytime it comes to a situation where Lucas might have to draw his sword, she's like, no, don't do that, because she's terrified of him. I mean, I doubt it'll make it any better, but the witch is still alive. But even that doesn't change the fact is he still did what he did. It's like, yeah, he tries to explain, he's like, she was almost going to kill you. What would you have me do? And it's like, not do what he did. Like, yes, there's self-defense, but what he did was just pure animalistic and brutality. And it's just like, obviously, I mean, and that's not necessarily a fault of his own. It seems like that's kind of like what the guard is all about. That seems like that's something that's ingrained into them, or maybe it's people with a specific trait, a specific like lack of empathy or something, is what the wizard, chooses to when it comes to a soldier. It makes you wonder, is it something that he saw within him? The fact is they had that lack of empathy and made him join his guard, or is it a situation where it's like he breaks a person down until they become just a bloodthirsty machine that would just follow orders and do what needs to be done? Because that type of brutality is meant to look past everything else, look past whoever the target is, and just like, oh, they're a threat, they need to be neutralized, essentially. So, but even when you take the situation of but then you have Lucas being like, well, Dorothy, you want to act like I'm dangerous, which yes, I am. I'm not denying it, because it's going to be scary finding out the truth, because I don't know where this is all going to lead when it comes to me finding out the truth about myself and everything. It's not even just about her. Like, he also saw a darker side of himself that he didn't know he was really capable of. He didn't want to believe what the witch was saying about the guards. Like, people like him are terrible people. But now he's kind of seeing that for himself, and she's seeing that. And I'm sure it's not, because Lucas is the first person that she's really gotten to know in her time here in Oz. It's the first person she's really come to her first traveling companion. It's the person that she relies on and stuff about everything. And it's like, to have that person kind of just defiled in front of your eyes by just seeing them in a different light, seeing just that darker side of them, it's hard to go back to seeing him as the person that she first met, Like I brought up last episode, trying to get him to do the whole knock knock joke situation. But Lucas is like, no matter how dangerous I am, and I am dangerous, and there are other people who are just as dangerous as me, no one is as dangerous and as powerful as you, referencing the gun and stuff like that. Because it's like, no one in Oz has anything like that. Because even with all her magic and being like, oh, nothing can stop me, only thing that can stop me is another witch, even the Witch of the East was taken out by a single bullet. It just shows you just kind of how powerful it is. And like, that's kind of a thing I find very interesting. Like, obviously the world of Oz is a blend of science and magic, but it's also cool that it takes place in a more modern era, that Dorothy could end up, obviously the gun is not her own. It came with a police car that she came with, obviously with Toto as well. So it's like, it's so interesting that that type of thing came into this world. It's like, because in this type of world, it's like, you wouldn't be able to really counter a gun. I mean, granted, there's obviously limited ammo. So it's not like it's like a constant weapon. So it's kind of like a temporary problem for now, but it still does present the issue. Just like, it does kind of put a target on her back, because something that kind of kept, like, I didn't really bring it up last episode because it really didn't click in my head, but now it kind of has. The Beast Forever is essentially a massive destruction that takes on different forms. Flooding, it takes on a form of fire. It's the last time it appeared, it seems like it took on a form of water, because the Witch of the West was basically referencing the fact is that it drowned most of her sisters, like the other witches, and she was kind of powerless to stop it. She also brought up something very interesting. Like, it's kind of hard to say exactly where where her mindset is, because it seems like she spends most of her time high. I'm guessing, obviously, when you look at the circumstances, kind of read between the lines, it's like, obviously that's her way of dealing with everything that's happened. The whole Beast situation, losing, like, being one of the last few witches of her covenant. Because that's something else I didn't bring up last episode either. It's like, her and Glinda are kind of the last one. It hurt even more when her sister died, because that's like, now it's only her and Glinda are really kind of left of their coven. Their coven is like slowly dwindling down. It was like already very few of them, now it's like even less. And I guess she keeps herself high to kind of deal with the pain. It's a lot easier to just numb herself than outright deal with it. She brings up something interesting to the wizard of being like, because obviously the whole situation with those women doing what happened to them, basically they were kind of possessed by magic. That was pretty brutal. Like, they're just falling, and I'm like, oh, they're about to land on their feet and everything. I was like, oh, what's going to happen here? And then their necks snap. I'm like, ugh. Basically, they were hung by invisible rope, and that was just that. Like, that's crazy about this show. It has a dark, like, eerie tone to it. It's not eerie, but just a darker tone to it. It's like, was not expecting that. Just like their necks snapping like that. It's like, ugh. But essentially, obviously, it all points to the Witch of the West. But it's just like, I don't practice magic. She's like, truth be told is, I don't want magic. I don't like magic. She's like, I'm glad you banned magic simply because it's like, I don't, it's like magic hasn't done her any good. It didn't help her save her sisters, it didn't do anything in the might of the beast, so it just, to her, it's useless. It serves no real purpose. She's like, I haven't really dabbled in it, but it's like, obviously last episodes kind of, show that, and that might not be this, because of the whole pulling the spells from East, her and Glinda doing her thing. Still don't really know where that's all playing out, but obviously it seems like they've got plans of their own. What that means exactly, I don't know. Like, it's a situation where you kind of feel like maybe what part of what she said was genuine, but at the same time, it does seem like she might have been covering. I mean, granted, you had Anna, kind of the woman that's kind of serving the wizard. She actually, she serves Glinda, but she's kind of like almost like a liaison for the wizard. Apparently, which it was kind of interesting. She was kind of doing some investigating of her own because she's trying to figure out, okay, where did the magic come from? She ended up figuring out, okay, the magic's not actually coming from West. It's actually coming from somewhere else. Because she was like, because basically there's these signs that be like, oh, this sign means that the beast is returning. It's like, oh, the beast will be here in 8 days. But then like, oh, that the beast will take on the form of fire or something like that, which everyone's pressuring the wizard, be like, yo, bring the golems to life, because they're all, your rock monsters are going to be the only things that could fight, the beast, especially if it's on the form of a fire. But Anna, being smart like she is, and then it was like, no, like, she's like, actually, she got it wrong. The beast is actually not going to take that form. It's actually going to take apparently on the form of someone and it's basically going to come after you in the form of hit you in your weaknesses. Because essentially saying that basically those 3 women killing themselves was because of the beast magic. It was influenced by the beast magic, and that it was kind of like almost like a simile for the wizard himself. Because apparently those particular women, because I didn't really catch it until the last episode, I was like, oh yeah, this whole situation is a brothel. She even says it herself, like the Witch of the West says, like, yeah, she runs a brothel. But essentially, the three women that killed themselves were women that when they hooked up with men, they were constantly with men that couldn't perform, that couldn't rise to the occasion, to be exact. And essentially, that's supposed to be a simile for or just a comparison for the wizard, because apparently, because Anna kind of sees through it, she goes, you don't actually control the golems, do you? That's why you want the adept, I think that's the little thing that is sealed away, that the only person that can open it is East. She's the only one that could, because she's the one that kind of sealed it, so it's only her incantate, like her own, like, because spells are like fingerprints. There's no like one set, like there's no like, each spell is its own incantations and symbols to it. So there's different combinations that can be used, to try and figure it out. So it's like they needed East to be the one to remove it, but they can't. So apparently, like, the wizard doesn't actually control them. Apparently, the power to control them is within the adept. So it's like that's why the wizard wanted it open so badly. Kind of bringing up the point that I kind of already knew. The wizard isn't almighty and powerful like he pretends to be. His real name is Frank. I forgot what his last name is, but he's like, yeah, I was a regular man at one point in time, but he's like, I did, because essentially the West kind of made a reference to Anna's mom. Essentially, like, Anna's mom was kind of in that world, kind of being, I guess, a slightly proper way of saying it, Lady of the Night. She partook in the brothel or whatever, and essentially West kind of alluded to the fact that she's like, oh yeah, I had a taste of her, and so did the wizard. I mean, which it's like, oh, you don't have to worry, wizard. She's not your daughter, so you can have a taste too. It's like, once again, bringing up the point is like West isn't in the right state of mind just because, like, it's mainly out of grief. She just keeps herself high all the time. Like, it's once again bringing it back, like, it has a like darker tone than you would expect from like Oz. But like I said, it depends on what iteration of it. Probably, I mean, who knows what's, I mean, only if you've read the books, because maybe there's stuff like that in the books. I mean, I don't know. But like, based on what Wizard Oz related stuff I've seen, it's just like, wow, that's almost like a completely different world. I'm sure the TV show adds a darker tone to it, because it, I mean, don't get me wrong, it makes it very interesting to see them make the changes the way they did. But obviously, the wizard isn't, the great and powerful person that he is now. He's like, I was just a regular man, but he's like, I didn't want to be bound by my past. he's saying all this to make Anna feel better. He's like, what I did was I destroyed my past. Anyone that didn't respect me and call me the wizard, I destroyed them and got them out of the way. I made people go, nope, I am the wizard that fear me, and, kind of brings up the fact that Anna was like, so, do you know what was my mother like? And he was like, I don't remember, kind of like almost being like, oh, that's a little crappy, because it's like, I guess you could argue it'd be like, oh, because it's been so long, but at the same time, it could also be like, oh, there were so many women that it's kind of like, why would I remember her face type of thing? But it seems like she's like, oh, good. But the moment she's walking away, the wizard's kind of got a look on his face and makes me think like, maybe he does remember her mom. He just didn't want to let her know that he did. So maybe she held a special place in his heart. Who knows? Because essentially her mom kind of gave her up. The same reason why Dorothy's mom gave her up is for wanting to give her a better life. But Wes kind of laughed at the fact it's like, yeah, your mom literally gave you up, and like years later you find yourself right back here. Just how messed up is that? But Anna's the one who predicted all this stuff. She figured it out. That's why I'm kind of like, oh, go Anna. She's kind of a detective, isn't she? Like taking notes and figuring that stuff out. I mean, obviously there's a lot more to it than that. But she's pretty smart, like I said, figuring out the wizard's secret, because like no one knows it. That's kind of obviously the big twist about it. But the thing is, the wizard doesn't actually have any powers. He's just a very smart man. That's kind of the thing behind the wizard. He's a big con artist. It does make me wonder, will it be a situation like the movies? Like, is he actually from a different world? Is he like actually from the same world as Dorothy? Well, we're our world, or at least this realm or something like that. Is he from this world? Is it going to be a situation where like, oh, he's from this world, but he's from a different time period than Dorothy? That the fact of the matter is that, because it didn't seem like, I think they gave you a close-up of the car, but he didn't recognize what it was. So it could be a situation that he's from an earlier time period where it's like he doesn't recognize that, because that's kind of that's what it seemed like was happening in The Wizard of Oz the Great and Powerful, the movie. So it seemed like he was from could have been from a time that was like the late 1800s, early 1900s or something like that. So it could have been a situation like he's from a different time than Dorothy. So that's why he couldn't recognize a police car as just being a machine type of thing, a mechanical vehicle essentially, So maybe time moves differently in Oz than it does in the other world. Maybe that's a type of situation we might see ourselves coming upon. But because one prediction that Anna gave was like, oh, there's going to be snow, even though it's summertime, and then lo and behold, snow, which is kind of coinciding with what I'm talking about. The fact is the whole tornado situation. I'm like, that's why I was wondering like whether the weather was just like a contained thing, or was that just kind of an after effect of everything that, Dorothy ended up doing with that whole situation that led to that happening. Was it always going to happen, or was it just like it seemed more like, coincidence and everything for it to be snow and everything. It seems like it had to be like hey, nature and everything's kind of out of whack because of what's happened, specifically because of what Dorothy did, because she ended up becoming like the new mistress kind of, because she is wearing the gauntlets, which let the East control the elements and stuff like that. She ended up meeting her guard, Solomon, who was like, hey, telling Lucas is like, hey, give me your sword. The only blade that the mistress will need is me. She put on that the witch's outfit and was like, Lucas was stunned. He's like, whoa, she looked very nice in that dress. It looked very nice on her. I'm getting a little tongue tied. So she did try to do her best on it. It does seem like she can tap into the power a little bit. Very impressive considering it's her first time really tapping into it. Like I said, I still like the fact is, it's like obviously the ruby slippers a little bit, taking it from the little Oz information I do know. And it's like, obviously, but it's in the form of her hands. It does make you wonder, like, if that's specifically what she has, does that mean each of the other, does West and Glinda also have something like that? But the fact is that she was able to tap into the power a little bit, even though she's never really used magic before, and she was able to walk across the water. And she went to the tornado because mainly for her, it's like she wanted to get back home, no matter what the cost may be, even if it meant like possibly her dying. At the end of the day, all that mattered was her getting back home. Lucas is super against that because it's like, are you stupid? That's a terrible idea, because there's a difference between being brave and being reckless. And it's like, in his mind, it's like she's just being reckless. But for her, it's just like all she cares about is getting home. She she just wants to get away from this place, especially because it's like, you were going through the trouble of trying to track down a wizard, but it's like, hey, he wants you dead. So it's like your one way home. It's like, you can't go down that route. So it's like, you have to make a way of your own. So it's just like, I guess in her mind, it's like, if I don't do it this way, there's no other way home, because my only other option here in Oz is death, because I'm going to be hunted down and whatnot, But she ends up tapping into the tornado and gets sucked off to somewhere else. And then all of a sudden she happens to look down and she sees like, I forgot what it was. It was some kind of clothing, and it has Kay Chapman on it, the name of her biological mother. And then when she came back, like, because she can't control the powers, like I said, this is her first time using magic, the place ends up breaking apart, essentially. The guy Solomon ends up staying behind because it's like he had no more purpose, because his mistress was gone, and Dorothy wasn't his real mistress because the torch wasn't really passed along, The whole thing was under false pretense, and basically the place got destroyed. And her one way of kind of a place to get answers as well as a way home was destroyed. So now she has no choice but to track down the wizard. Which is kind of, like I said, coinciding with, obviously, like, the storyline is set it up to kind of be like, obviously her mom's originally from Oz, possibly, because Solomon referred to her as an interloper, and apparently the wizard actually got her back home, and it's like, what's up with that? Now this is going to be a situation, because like, we still don't know about Dorothy's biological dad, so maybe the wizard is her biological dad. Maybe there's something between him and her mom. So this whole time that maybe he's been trying to kill his, because that's another thing too, is like, is the beast supposed to be Dorothy? Because it's like, oh, the beast is supposed to take on the form of someone like someone who's attacking you at your weaknesses. But then it's like, why would that whole situation with the ladies happen? Like, I don't know. Because it's like, it's not like Dorothy would do that. Maybe what's going to happen is because Dorothy first appears, maybe the wizard will interpret it as like, oh, she is the beast, because she's come from a different world, because the beast can take on many different forms, and like, this will probably be the first time the beast is taken on a form of a human, especially because also she's the one that killed East, so that's going to add more pressure to the situation. So, because the question is like, why? Because the circumstance, like, no matter what it is, like, why would she specifically run from this realm with Dorothy and try to take her, like, obviously, to the realm and, to Earth with Kansas, hide her there? Like, why? What was the circumstances that made her leave? What was it that made the wizard decide to help her leave, go back to her original world? Because that's where East Castle kind of represented the focal point of doing that. So it's kind of like, why would he do that? Like, how would he not know that that is his child too? Not less she found out after she had already left Oz that she was pregnant. Maybe he never knew. So, I mean, we're going to see whether that's true or not in the future or not. And final note I want to talk about is the whole Tip situation. A lot of interesting developments on that part. Ended up, it was very interesting because you had her friend constantly look like he was looking at her chest, and it's like, you saw that, and it's like, to me, that's like such a, like, I don't know, it was just kind of like, that felt too real. It's like, yeah, he's a perverted teenager checking out someone that's just like, your friend's going through a crisis and you're busy checking her out. You should be ashamed of yourself. But essentially what they ended up finding out, because they ended up getting the potion that Tip always kept taking, the medicine, took it, and it's like, oh yeah, actually, Tip, yeah, people lied to you. You're not actually a boy. You are always a girl. This form you're in is exactly what you're supposed to look like. This is what you were born. But someone used this medicine to make you, because like before Tip went to that witch, Tip, was already looking like a boy. That's why she didn't realize that she was a girl from the very beginning, that she always thought she was a boy, because it's like someone wanted to make her that way. I think they talked about the fact that she has bad blood. That's kind of the excuse they gave for the medicine. But it's like, what if that is the case? What if who Tip really is of some kind of royalty or whatever, or maybe she's from a cursed bloodline where it's like someone's trying to hide her away, because it's like, if they find out like, oh, she's still alive, they'll kill her type of situation. So they hid her as a boy. I mean, maybe, because that witch did legitimately seem like, even though she was kind of off her rocker, it did seem like she was trying to protect her. But for Tip, it's like, it's understandable. It's overwhelming, because it's like, you've lived your entire life this way. I mean, even before finding out that this is who she was, which made things worse because it's like, at first it's like, oh crap, I'm stuck, I'm turned into this, I'm not even me, I don't even feel comfortable in my own skin, I feel like I'm in someone else's skin. It's hard enough having a situation like that, legitimately, an identity crisis that gets even worse because it's like, holy crap, I've been living a lie my entire life because apparently I thought I was this person, but this is who I really am. And it's just a lot to take on. And she's just tired of it all. She wants to go back to being who she was before, but there's no chance of that because that medicine can't be remade because it's a specific magic. It's not like a necessarily like herbal medicine. It's literally a cursed magic. And it's like, magic is forbidden across Oz, so anyone who could make it would be in trouble for it. Her friend is just like, no, it doesn't matter. You're still tipped to me. You're still my friend. And he makes a move on her. He kisses her, and she's like, "What the hell are you doing?" He's like, "I don't know why I did that." He's like, "Come on, it could just be us. I got this dagger. I know you told me to leave it, but it's like we can sell it. We can just have a happy life. We could live together." It's like, because that's what she wants, and she's just like, this isn't me, like, stop doing this. It's just like all the added pressure, and she pushes him. He falls back and falls to his death, and she's just standing there. I was like, once again, third time I mentioned it, dark. Was not expecting that. She killed her friend, or probably like only person that she really knew in this world had by her side. That was now she's kind of all alone again, and it's like, oh. So I'm interested to see where that will go, like where that storyline is heading, like what this all means for Tip. Is it a situation like, because I don't think that cursed blood situation, like maybe it was complete BS, but I feel like there is some legitimacy to that. But like everything else, we would just have to wait to see. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.